SNOWTRAX is sponsored by Polaris, Think Outside, Yamaha, revs your heart, FXR Racing, celebrating 25 years of speed, and by IPONE Lubricants, exclusively distributed by Parts Canada.
Utility sleds aren't something I think about on a daily basis. The functionality that they offer isn't something I need. A snowmobile for me is just a toy. But for a large number of people, a snowmobile is so much more than a toy. It's a tool they use day to day to help them get jobs done more easily in the snow. There are countless different purposes for a utility snowmobile, from collecting firewood, forest management, trapping, farming, ice fishing, even on a horse ranch. But what makes the perfect utility sled? Why does the market offer utility sleds from 550 fan-cooled all the way up to 800cc liquids? What do you actually need? This all depends on two factors. First, what you need to do with the sled, and second, what size of sled you're comfortable with. A small person isn't likely going to be as comfortable working with an 800cc utility sled as they would be with a 400. Likewise, if you're hauling ice fish huts or other super heavy loads, a 400 may not be the best choice. But if you're working around a hobby farm, it's perfect, as we're about to see.
I'm Charlotte, I'm a registered nurse, and on the side I own a hobby farm. So I have 2 horses and then 2 mini horses. So on the farm, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We usually use a 4-wheeler for the job, but in the winter, kind of hard to do with all the snow. So it's nice to have a sled around to clear trails. I don't have an indoor arena, so the trails is the only way I can keep the horses fit.
I wouldn't describe Charlotte as a big person. She's small and she's lightweight, which means a big utility sled could be a handful for her day in and day out. Luckily for her, Yamaha has the answer with the Transporter Lite.
So the Transporter Lite makes it a little bit easier on me, somebody who's maybe newer to sledding. I'm not really that confident on trails. The sled itself is smaller. It's not overly powerful, but powerful enough that it can get through the deep snow. So it's just easier for someone like me who's maybe newer at this to kind of maneuver and get through the trails. A couple things I like about the Transporter Lite is that it's an electric start, so I don't have to pull start it, which makes it easier for me. It also has a push button reverse, so you can just easily get it into reverse and maneuver it where you'd want it to go.
The Transporter Lite is different from any other utility sled on the market thanks to its 397cc semi-direct injected single-cylinder 2-stroke engine that puts out a claimed 65 horsepower. Where other entry-level utility sleds are still using fan-cooled and carbureted engines that require a choke to start and smoke like crazy, Yamaha's Transporter Lite starts easily, idles perfect, and creates almost no smoke at all. It never loads up when you leave it idling for a while, and it's surprisingly good on both fuel and oil. Many would assume that a big 397cc single would be a vibration factory, but a counterbalancer helps smooth things out big time. I will say that at idle there is still some noticeable vibration, but once you get the RPMs up, it goes away almost completely. Light, small, and capable were the 3 main targets for the Transporter Lite, and Yamaha has done a great job of hitting all 3. But there are a few things that we think could use some attention, and Charlotte agrees.
So the only thing I really notice is that the hand warmers on the sled get a little bit too hot, so I constantly have to be turning them off and on.
I couldn't agree more. The hot grips and thumb warmer on the Transporter Lite have 2 settings, off and nuclear. There's no way a switch with 3 positions, including a low setting, could cost more than a few pennies. The only other thing I think the Transporter Lite could use is a sway bar. No, it's not designed for high-speed trail riding, but other than in the mountains, there aren't any scenarios where I think a sway bar would be a negative on a sled like this. The dimensions of the Transporter Lite are interesting. Technically, it's 3/4 size, which means it is smaller than a full-size sled. It also features a 38-inch wide front end, which, while narrow by full-size sled standards, doesn't actually feel bad on the Transporter Lite. The most interesting part about the dimensions and specs of this sled, though, are the 3/4 size combined with the track and skid frame. Out back, you're going to find a 146 skid with an articulated rail wrapped in a 15 wide by 146 long track with a 1.6 lug. Now, this is a serious sneaker for a mid-size sled, but that 397cc single does a great job of handling it, and the flotation and traction are insane. Ergonomically, the Transporter also sports downsized dimensions. They're not so small that a large person can't use it, but they're definitely tailored to a smaller size rider.
So one thing I really appreciate about this sled is that other sleds that I've ridden, I've noticed that I struggle with my light weight to turn the sled and to maneuver it in sharp corners and things like that, whereas the Transporter Lite seems to turn a little bit and maneuver better with my small size.
If it seems like we like the Transporter Lite around here, it's because we do. It does things in a way other sleds don't. It offers functionality for smaller riders that could previously only be found in vintage sleds like an old Tundra or Bravo LT, but it doesn't skimp on the technology and fuel efficiency of any modern snowmobile.
So honestly, I would go out and purchase this sled for myself personally, just because it's great on the trails. I can maneuver it, but then I can also use it around the farm and doing the chores for the horses and making trails so that I can continue to ride my horses through the winter.
SNOWTRAX is brought to you by the regions of Quebec by the sea. Discover our ride ideas.
You know, you can say snowbike or you can say TimberSled, and at the end of the day, people come to the same conclusion. It's a bike with a track and ski. TimberSled is a very well-known name. But for a long time, snowbikes were, well, pretty much deep snow rigs. Yeah, you could run them in the flats, but they didn't really do well in any hard-packed terrain, and really only became like super playful and fun when the powder was deep and the hills were steep. That was then, but this is now, and when Polaris and TimberSled joined brands, big things happened. And from those big things, this is what was birthed. It's the 2021 TimberSled RIOT S, and it's a total departure from pretty much the norms of snowbiking. It's everything that a flatlander or a foothill rider could be dreaming of. To say that it's a departure really isn't strong enough. It's a revolution on one ski. The TimberSled RIOT is meant to bring that playfulness, the light front end, that feel of a motocross bike to the snow. And the original RIOT did that. Now for 2021, the RIOT S has arrived, and it takes things to kind of a different level with some features that I really didn't originally think that was a feature, and I didn't truly buy into. And the biggest thing that I questioned is overall ride height. It's 3 inches shorter. Where does that come from? I assumed from the travel, and I'm not really the kind of person who says less is more when it comes to suspension. That 3 inches of lower seat height sure does come right out of the rear suspension. If I use the solid rear strut, I get 10 inches. If I put the TSS suspension strut, where your moto swing arm shock goes, I get an extra 8 inches of travel, which is exactly how I'm running the YZ450FX. Now, if I was using a regular RIOT, not the RIOT S, I'd have a base suspension of 13 inches with the solid strut, and with the TSS, I'd have 21, 3 inches more all the way around. But take your expectations and thoughts of being disappointed and toss them right out the window, because this RIOT S, it's a beast to be reckoned with. So I can't comment on the solid rear strut rideability of this thing because, well, Polaris sends us TSS kits and we put them on. So I don't really know how that handles, but I can say with the TSS, the 18 inches of suspension travel makes this thing a total wheelie monster, and it's got like endless travel that feels super cushy. It's quite amazing. Okay, so the most unique and I believe appealing characteristic of the RIOT S is, number one, it's easier to get onto. It's 3 inches lower height, so this goes a long way for any rider wanting to feel more confident and less like you're riding a horse and needing a stepladder to mount the pickin' thing. Also, it allows me to flat foot the ground, and this is something that's really important because I really like that feeling of being in control, especially when you're wanting to stop or travel across harder snow surfaces. Putting that foot down and getting contact on the ground is a huge thing. Now, that second characteristic I was talking about is the ability for the TimberSled kit and the TSS to kind of work in harmony, and for that travel to allow the front ski to lift when you get on the throttle. It's a thing of beauty. And why am I so excited about it? Because typically snowbikes don't like to get the front end light by just twisting the throttle. Encouragement typically by way of a wind lip or an incline are required. But when it comes to this RIOT S, it's ready and willing to lift the front end, while at the same time sink into all that rear suspension goodness and give you kind of that berm hooking, aggressive, yeah, I'll say it, moto feel. So the RIOT S comes as a base model and it also comes as an LE. This is an LE, comes with really cool graphics. You can select it to match your bike brand, and it also comes with the Fox QS3 shocks in the back, and they actually do an incredible job of changing the way that this thing rides. And I'm really stoked with the QS3 shocks because the change in compression is noticeable in the stiffer ride. However, on the RIOT S, the compression change actually settles the front end of the bike, and it causes it to wheelie less and have kind of more of a planted front end feel. This gives it more of a similar characteristic to a traditional aero kit at full stiff. I find myself riding at soft and medium almost all the time, and I really only reach for the stiff setting when I'm looking to drop off something like a ledge or get the bike airborne. Now when it comes to traction, just because it's an S doesn't mean that you lose out on anything. It's still got the 2.5-inch lug, and I really appreciate that on this bike with the lower seat height. It means that your forward propulsion is still excellent, even in the deep snow, and it's like all timber sleds, the track is tapered on each side. I find it pretty important to have this, especially on the RIOT S, as running in slightly less snow than say the 137 Big Mountain Aero kits. You need that extra taper to help the bike maintain traction, while not making the cornering of the RIOT seem too harsh or unstable. It's really an incredible harmony between the front traverse ski and spindle angle and the rear track and suspension setup that makes the RIOT S such a playful and maneuverable snow bike. I always try to find some negatives to point out no matter what it is that we're testing, but the problem today is that the TimberSled RIOT S delivers exactly what Polaris advertises. If you want more travel, go with the regular RIOT. If you want lower seat height and more rideability and something that's a little bit more playful and fun and flickable, go with the RIOT S. I mean, truly, I can't find any problems here.
Trail Tech is sponsored by Princess Auto. Make it work.
Over the past few years, I've told you all about the benefits of using IPONE motor oil in your snowmobiles. But over the winter months, many of us have other motorized equipment that should be paid close attention to as well. At the top of the list, ATVs and side-by-sides are a huge multi-season vehicle that are most times utilized for plowing snow or getting to the ice fish hut during the winter months. We all know how important it is to use a high-quality motor oil in our sleds, so it only makes sense to consider what you're using currently in your ATV or side-by-side during the cold winter months. And I would suspect it's the same oil you were running during the summer. IPONE has multiple offerings for your power sports products, but when it comes to ATVs or side-by-sides, I like to run the Katana 5W40 Full Synthetic. I trust that IPONE oil is precisely as stated, and their use of high-quality additives will lead to a longer-lasting, better-performing engine over time. Katana is a 100% synthetic 4-stroke oil and has anti-corrosion and anti-oxidation properties that will keep the internals of your ATV or side-by-side clean. This is especially important during the winter months when a hot engine is many times left in a cold garage or outside after plowing and condensation can form. Around the SNOWTRAX headquarters, there is no shortage of equipment, but when it comes to the 120 sleds, man, my kids run the wheels off these things. And I gotta be honest, because there's no hour meter on these sleds, we don't keep a close eye on the oil change frequency as they're always out ripping around. Because of this, and because of the strictly winter use, I put the same super high quality ester-based Snow 4 0W40 full synthetic motor oil in them that I use in the full-size sleds. With how many miles are put on these little sleds at wide open throttle 90% of the time and run tank after tank, a little higher quality oil will go an extra long ways for life expectancy, and should we go into overtime on the oil change, we have the assurance that the ester-based Snow 4 that stays at 0W40 longer due to the reduced additives will give us the best performance the longest. It doesn't hurt that ester-based oil like the Snow 4 also has the properties of reduced friction, offering the kiddos easier starting when it's cold. Some of the other equipment that we completely forget about until it's an absolute necessity are generators. While they usually stick at the bottom of the list when it comes to maintenance, they're worth their weight in gold when you need them. Generators sit a lot. They're an infrequently used power product, but when we get hit with an ice storm or a huge 4-foot snowfall that shuts the roads down, they can quite literally be our lifeline. With that said, how often do we just shut them down after they save the day and completely forget about them until the next time that we need them to power our homes and keep us warm? Using a high-quality motor oil in your generator is especially important because they sit so much. Standard oils will actually be pulled off the engine's internals due to gravity. A 5W40 Katana oil change would be fine in this instance if you frequently use your generator. However, for most of us, we don't fire our generators up more than 2 to 3 times a year. Because of this, I'll pull out the Snow 4 yet again. The 0W40 rating will be fine in the summer, but especially good in the cold winter months, when the Jenny has been sitting for ages and then expected to go to full power for sometimes days on end. The ester-based oil has a unique characteristic of actually being attracted to the steel and not washing off as quickly as traditional hydrocracked oil. This means your generator's internals will have better oil coating for longer, not to mention the reduced friction while running. There's a lot of other outdoor power products, from snowblowers to water pumps for flooding the rink, that could really benefit from a power sports or winter-specific motor oil, keeping you running stronger, longer.
There's been lots of talk this year about the arrival of high value, that's code word for low price sleds in model year 2021. On this week's test ride, we're going to take a close look at the leader of the pack in this emerging new segment. So why have I knighted the new Ski-Doo MXZ Sport as the leader in the high value segment? Because the Ski-Doo Sport isn't making any excuses about its target audience. The Sport can play all day with 600cc sleds. Why? Because it has a torquey, liquid-cooled 600cc ROTAX underhood, and the whole package is based on the full-on G4 chassis, used on all upscale Ski-Doo models. Maybe you're wondering why these details matter. They matter a lot. Even though the Sport is at the high end of the MSRP equation, you get exactly what you pay for. Here's my point. The other competitors in this emerging category are the Polaris Indy Evo, the Yamaha SX Venom, and the Arctic Cat Blast 4000. All these sleds represent excellent value, and all of them have MSRPs lower than the Sport 600. Here's where you have to get out your calculator. The MXZ Sport's 600cc reed valve EFI engine throws down a healthy 85 horsepower. That's a full 20 ponies more than any of its competitors, and believe you me, it makes much more than an inconsequential difference. Listen up, my oil-injected friends. The MXZ Sport can pull its weight and your corn-fed frame down a lake at impressive speeds. This means the Sport is a truly credible ride for any snowmobiler, whether experienced or a newbie. The Sport's 85 horsepower output is oh so close to Ski-Doo's ROTAX Ace 4-stroke triple. As a result, the Sport is capable of carving a smile in your whiskery visage every time you squeeze the loud handle. We would rate its performance as more than adequate on lake runs and very good on trails. You won't be the last sled to the end of the lake when you show up with a new MXZ Sport 600. Okay, so you're picking up what I'm putting down here, right? The other guys' high-value sleds are good, but they just don't have the legs to keep up with the 600R Sport. 85 horsepower trumps 65 horsepower every time. We've spent enough time on the new MXZ Sport this winter to know owners won't get bored with the performance of this ride. In fact, there's good reason to believe a Sport 600 may occupy the same place in the snowmo market that the much heralded Spark Sea-Doo PWC owns. What do I mean? The Sport 600 may be all the snowmobile a significant number of riders ultimately want. Standard equipment is not sparse here. There's a digital gauge set, heated thumb and grips, electric start, and steel body gas bag shocks. Although the seat looks small, it is comfortable. Up front, there's Ski-Doo's RAS AA-arm IFS. And yes, in case you think we missed the point, we know that the 600R Sport is at the high end of the MSRP scale. However, it is way, way lower than an MXZ 600R Adrenaline. There's more splainin required surrounding the Sport. The rear suspension is fully reminiscent of what Ski-Doo referred to as SC5 before the arrival of R-Motion. This coupled 121-inch rear skid was the benchmark for trail riding smoothness in the 00s. In the new Sport, ride quality benefits from a 129-inch rail. Honestly, the sled rides remarkably well. Sure, R-Motion is the best rear skid in the biz, but this return engagement for the SC Series skid does not disappoint. So, how does Ski-Doo jam this much performance and this much value into a sub-$10,000 MSRP in the US? It's called economies of scale, and it goes like this. Okay, Who builds and sells the most snowmobiles in this biz? Skidoo does. Because Skidoo works to get as many of their different models onto a common platform as quickly as possible, they enjoy considerable cost savings at a level the other OEMs can't duplicate. Essentially, Skidoo can leave the big switch on the wall at the end of the production line in the on position and crank out some more G4 600 ROTAX variants and enjoy reduced costs because they're good at building a lot of snowmobiles every year. We've fielded questions from our viewers about bumping up the power on the 600 Sport by substituting a set of 600R E-Tech cylinders. Not a good idea. The Sport's 600 ROTAX is dimensionally the same as the 600R used in all other Skidoo G4 models. However, it is not E-Tech direct injected. This engine uses a new, not seen before, throttle body EFI system. Here's the other issue. This ROTAX 600 does not have exhaust valves. Fiddling with the Sport to increase power output will ultimately cost as much, if not more, than simply bellying up to the counter and buying a full-on MXZ 600R Adrenaline. So here's our proclamation. The new Sport 600 represents the most value you can get from your hard-earned snowmo dollar in model year 2021.
SNOWTRAX has been sponsored by MBRP Performance Exhaust, built for the victory lap, and by Arctic Cat Snowmobiles.